The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arsh Molu. I'm the head of operations for the Financial Freedom Program at the Human Rights Foundation. I'm joined today by two of my great friends, pioneers in the Bitcoin space in the Middle East region. We'll start with some introductions. Please, Roya first. Just tell us about yourself and your organization.
Thank you very much for having me here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Roya Mahboob, and I'm CEO and founder of the Digital Citizen Fund. My organization is a nonprofit which is providing access to education and financial literacy for the girls in Afghanistan. We're building the IT centers, we provide robotics education, we provide financial literacy, we also help the entrepreneur to start their own startups.
Yeah, Faisal.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faisal Al Mutar, originally from Iraq, and I'm based in the United States. I'm the founder and president of Ideas Beyond Borders, which is an organization that really the ultimate goal is to provide the region with the ideas and the capital to be prosperous. So I consider myself a kind of an accidental Bitcoin user as an organization, because how it really started with us is that our first project was about building Wikipedia in Arabic. I'm sure many of you have heard of Wikipedia. And most of the knowledge around the world is not available in Wikipedia Arabic. So when we started the organization, we started hiring a lot of the translators to really translate content from English, French into Arabic and build the Arabic Wikipedia with content about knowledge, science, etc. Then the second part is Innovation Hub, where we support startups and businesses across the region, but in particular focus for areas where there is not enough of capital. That's Iraq, Lebanon, and some of Afghanistan. And the third one is work related to policy and journalism. And you can see about every aspect of our work, the subject of money transfer comes up. Is that how we're going to be able to pay these people? And that's how we were able to discover, actually through the work of Arsh and Arsh's boss or executive person, Alex, who really kind of brought all of us to be familiar with the Bitcoin space, be able to utilize it to solve the challenges that are relevant to our organizations.
Yeah, and you speak about these challenges, right? So today we're here to talk about Bitcoin as a tool for the unbanked, a topic that's been brought up in Bitcoin circles throughout the past years through the work and advocacy of HRF and many other organizations. When we look at the topic of unbanking today, right? It's almost 2026. We have over 2 billion people around the world that still don't have access to banking. I think one of the issues here is that it's not quite a technical problem. It's more of an access problem, right? So from your position, Roya, the regions that you work in today, what are some of the challenges that people are facing which causes them to be unbanked?
Archie just beautifully says that it's not a technical problem. It's all about the accessibility and also this discrimination. I think that many of people thinking if they're putting so many banks and ATM machines, they can solve the issues, but I don't think so, because I think it's all about the identity, access, and permissions. And one of the issues is the gender discrimination. Still many of the women in the region, they don't have a bank account because simply the family members didn't give them the permission to open a bank account, or if they don't have an ID especially in the rural area, when they're born, they don't get a birth certificate, so they might not be able to open a bank account. Or if they have receiving the money, usually the male relatives or the families, they wanted to have access to and controlling the finance. So this is the one gender discrimination. And then the second is that identifications. And as I mentioned, there are many, almost 1 billion people don't have an ID, but I think that the majority are the women, and this majority of the women are mostly located in the Central Asia and countries like Afghanistan, part of Pakistan and other places, which they don't have an ID, which has created a problem because they needed to have an ID and documentation to open a bank account. And then another ways is that because the rural area don't have a bank, enough banks, and then they don't have the destination also is a problem because there is not enough bank in a rural area, in villages, so people can have access to the bank. And another one is obviously conflict, and which many of our regions is always there is a conflict and war is going on, which is making it danger for people to go to bank, to distance to get their monies, and inflation. I think that Faisal can talk more about that, and also the cash dependency. Many of our regions are people are mostly use cash daily, and they are really heavily, especially in Afghanistan, we use most of the time cash, and that's another issue that I can see it because it's created when you rely on much of the cash in your society. There is a corruption, there is a thief, there is an insecurity because when you go out, if a woman have a cash, there is always like a risk with that. So there is no safety if you have keep the cash with yourself. So I think that the unbanked, as you mentioned. It's not a only technical problem, but also is the accessibility and the discriminations, which is not designed for some people. I think the system hasn't designed to include everybody's.
And you're right on the note with that one. There's several problems, right? And it just a lot of times it's region dependent. But for the Middle East specifically, right? Like Faisal, Ideas Beyond Borders does so much work in a majority of Middle Eastern countries, right? So from the perspective of your organization, what is the root problem that you're seeing today with unbanking?
I would like to start with a story. So to show what the kind of good looks like, then to move on to the bad. So I moved into the United States in 2013. In the United States, you arrive, in our case, they give you a social security number. After getting a social security number, you are able to open a bank account. You go to Bank of America or sometimes even the small credit union, and then you get a bank account. And that bank account can connect you to the entire world because the United States is on the SWIFT program. After you get the social security number, after you get a bank account, you're able to start a business. Whether in my case, I was living in Texas, it's so much easier to go to open an LLC in the state of Texas. We'll take that to the Middle East. Well, thank goodness in the United Arab Emirates, we actually have one of the best business formation places in the entire world. So the United Arab Emirates is in a way extremely advanced when it comes to business formation. But that is in a way a bubble. This is not the case for most of the region. If you fly 2 hours north to where I come from in Baghdad, it might take you 3 to 6 months to be able to register a business. That's why most of the businesses are not registered. Most of the economy, as Roya was saying, is cash-based. And the reason most of it is cash-based is because it's based on the informal economy. There is not basic tax collection, and there's a lot of fraud and corruption and all of that. So I think the main challenge, there's a lot of challenges and obviously differ from a country to a country, but the region is obviously, I would say, can be put in 3 categories. You have kind of the Gulf monarchies, they tend to be the most prosperous, or the most kind of successful in terms of the economics. And then you have kind of the places where there is a lot of conflict in Iraq and Syria and Yemen and others. And then you have the kind of the North Africa context, which is kind of very heavy in population. Egypt is now close to 110 million people. So it's the most populated kind of nation in what's sometimes called the Middle East and North Africa. So all of these kind of countries have their own different dynamics, but what's really has been beneficial for the region is that we have places like the United Arab Emirates, and we have places like in which many people can actually register businesses here. So that allowed a lot of kind of ability. So if I am, let's say, starting a digital business in Iraq or Lebanon, I will register my company in either the ADGM or the IFC in Dubai and then be able to be connected to the entire world. That was not the case 15 or 20 years ago. With that being said, most businesses in Iraq are not financial technology or something that can be utilized kind of where that can be easily transaction. Most of the businesses are restaurants, hospitals, so they're struggling. And that's what I think, I mean, we're in the Bitcoin conference. That's what I think technologies like Bitcoin can really solve a lot of these structural challenges that cannot be solved easily by a strike of a pen.
So let's dive deeper into that, right? So from the perspective of the Human Rights Foundation, right? We've been around for 20 years, since before Bitcoin existed. One of the challenges that we've seen throughout the years was the constant censorship for NGOs, non-governmental organizations, activists, journalists, dissidents from all over the world, right? It was kind of this common theme of, well, we can't even open bank accounts in our home countries. How do we power our movements? And this has naturally led us to start talking about Bitcoin for the better half of a decade. And you two, as I mentioned earlier, are trailblazers in the sort of nonprofit Bitcoin world, right? So I want to talk about, Roya, you mentioned all these points, right, on how hard it is for women and girls in Afghanistan to have access to banking. What was your solution to that? Walk us through that.
Our story is with using the Bitcoin back in 2013. We had a platform that allowed hundreds of the women across Afghanistan to use writing the blogs and working for us as engineers or coders. But the issue that we had with these women, many of them, they didn't have a bank account. And if once they open a bank account, as I mentioned, they needed their family permissions and they needed documentation. And we figured out that to send the money deposited in the mail relatives, which usually they take the money and the whole point was to empower the women. It couldn't help. And then we looking at Hawala, which is 85% of the Afghan at the time, even at the time that Afghanistan was collapsed, was trusted Hawala system more than the banking system. It was totally male-dominated. And M-Pesa was very successful projects in Kenya, but in Afghanistan wasn't. So then we heard about Bitcoin, and we decided to use Bitcoin and develop it and building our own wallet system at the time. And with the push of a button, we could send the money directly to the bank account of the woman. So I remember the time when you send an international payment, it costs money. And it's also is not only delays. It's not like in an instant you can receive your money. It's 3 days and sometimes weeks you have to wait to receive your money. But now with the push of a button, the Bitcoins appear in the wallet of the women, and we could, bypass the physical and social barriers. And it was fast, it was a low cost, and it was an instant, and it was more secure because the women didn't need to go to stay in the line in a bank, and everybody knows that they have a cash with themselves they carry, especially when you are living in a conflict zone, in a war, and a poverty. Having cash, it sometimes makes more danger for you. So that's how we started to using Bitcoin back in 2013. It wasn't because we wanted to do investment or many of the other people use it there for trading or anything else. For us, was as a necessity. It was it's a survival tools. That's why we use it.
So you use out of necessity, right? Not because you exactly wanted to, right? And I think what's so special about this is you mentioned 2013, right? What was the price of Bitcoin when you started paying hundreds of women and girls in Afghanistan?
At the beginning when we started, it was $100, but obviously the price goes up to $800, and we changed our business system on that. And then my sister also helped the girls to, when you receive a Bitcoin, obviously the girls wants to know how they make it cash. So she bought from them the cash and teaching them how, they traded the Bitcoins with the cash. And then they make a little bit money out of that as well. And then we also talk with some of the shops, local shops, if they receive Bitcoin, we can give them the cash and then some percentage. But that whole system we created at the time.
Yeah, and so your sister became like the de facto peer-to-peer buyer of this Bitcoin, and then she ended up using the Bitcoin to finance her education at Cornell, right? So
yes.
This is just a woman from Afghanistan doing that, right? So no other system can do that besides Bitcoin, right? And that's the perfect segue for Faisal, right? Like, how has Bitcoin empowered IBB and all of the research and initiatives that you all do?
So, looking at all of our programs, whether it's the education part of empowering many translators and people who can make knowledge accessible around the Arab region. Now we started with 0 subscribers when we started 2017. Now we have about 8.5 million subscribers across the region, with many people, especially concentrated in Iraq and other places. So I hope one day we get make the Bitcoin conference in Iraq, hopefully the next couple of years. And then the second one is funding the businesses. So really, the way that our organization was structured, and then when we get to know about Bitcoin, is that we give people the choice. It's like, what type of how do you want to receive your payment? Do you want to receive it through Hawala, which we used to do at the time? In few occasions, if they are based in places like Jordan, they could use the SWIFT account or their banking system. If they're based in the UAE, then it's obviously very easy. And then the third option was Bitcoin. And then when we actually start paying people, we start doing surveys to understand why people make these choices. Some of it is structural, because if they are based in the Arab Emirates, then of course you're going to get paid by wire transfer, or same with Jordan. But some of it is also socioeconomic. So as Roya were mentioning, of how the price of Bitcoin increased over time, and that really helped a lot of people who are not necessarily Bitcoin traders on day-to-day basis, but they were a beneficiary of the rise of Bitcoin. And what we found is that people who are in the socioeconomic ladder within our team, who already had, in Iraq or Lebanon and other places, there's no advanced retirement system. You cannot invest in the stock market, in the US stock market or S&P 500 and NASDAQ and all these places, through many of these countries with no SWIFT banking systems. So in a way, Bitcoin became people's investments. So if somebody is in a socioeconomic level that is middle class or upper middle class, they will be like, don't give me the salary. I don't need the salary because I don't live paycheck to paycheck. But this is actually my investment account, because there is no other way for me to access the regular investment accounts that most people around the world have access to. Like, if you are living in the United States, which I'm guessing there are many people here, if you are an employee by a company, you have a 401k system, and then your entire retirement is connected to the stock market. Well, if you live in West Iraq, you don't have that option. So in a ways that Bitcoin became like people's investment account as a result of that. So and at the same time, and especially in a case like Iraq, it's utilized also as a payment method in terms of diaspora communities sending back to people. The challenge has been, I think always the challenge is find the countries that are not on SWIFT or not as advanced. Then you have to use exchanges to convert money into local currency in some occasions. Well, many people also don't have biometric IDs and things like that, so they cannot get verified. So there is the need for what sometimes we call the human ATMs. Are these people like your sister to some extent, are people who would accept Bitcoin and then convert it to cash. And I think more of these trusted networks needs to exist in many of the region for it to be able to for Bitcoin to take foothold in most of the region.
Yeah, and it's especially exciting in this region, right? In the Middle East and even in Africa. So, this conference has highlighted several African builders who are on the speaker list here, and I think it's worth pointing out that hey, there's more mobile phones in the world than there are bank accounts, right? So the opportunity is especially ripe right now. Even in the Africa region, where the unique part is they're building tools. For example, sending Bitcoin without the internet, right? Like these are things that are the first questions of a lot of people in the West. It's like, oh, okay, how do I use it? Like, what's happening? But the barriers are being addressed and developed right here. In Africa, you have 54 countries and you have 46 currencies, which none of them talk to each other, right? So that's why we're seeing the uptick in Bitcoin, and same goes for the Middle East region. So it's clear that people in these regions need the tools, and I know all of our organizations are working on really moving this forward. But just closing thoughts, right? We have about a minute left. What are some of the barriers when you go and talk to people about Bitcoin, right, in the region, and go advocate for it, right? What are some of the barriers that you've seen, and how can people get involved in the work that you do? Starting with Roya.
I think that one of them is the misinformation and fear. Many of people are hearing the news about Bitcoin and trading and a scam that exists, so that just makes most people to have a fear about to using the Bitcoin. I think that we needed to fight with the misinformation and giving the right information, created a community within each like a society that they can rely on the right information. And then obviously media is playing an important role on that. And then the second is that the third is the literacy of Bitcoins. So there is not enough education for the people to understand us. It's not only from young generation who tech savvy to knows about Bitcoin, but if you want women get involved, if you want to get your mother involved, you want to get your father involved, you want to get your kids involved, they needed to have a simple education in their own local language to know simply how they have to save 12, like for example, their secret words, how they making sure about the password, and how they can using the wallet. So all this information are important that we can be available and teaching and touting the every category of the generation that they can be easy. And then the third is that many of the devices and the application that is created is mostly is not in a localized and not simple as easy. So if I have an uncle in Afghanistan, he can't speak English, so he doesn't know. So he needed to have a simple, easy way to know how to education
is key.
To do that.
Faisal, closing thoughts. We're out of time, but I know the significance of this is just very, very important.
Yeah, I agree with everything Roya says. The second part is trust, really. Building those trusted networks in which the Bitcoin adaptability becomes pretty high, that people can find people that they trust, that they can convert to local currency if they need to. Ideally, there's adoption in most places, so in that way you usually don't need to off-ramp. But I think if we're able to have more adaptability and more trust between individuals on the subject, I think there is going to be a big solution to the region on that.
Yeah.
I think one more thing that I want to add, because we want to provide part of the education, people have to know that Bitcoin is not good for using daily because of the volatility of the prices, and people have to know that if they wanted to use it daily prices, it's good to use the stablecoin, and using Bitcoin as a saving value for over time. So the time that we bought the Bitcoins was like $100 to $800, and today is $92,000. It's I don't know how much today, but it's in the long term, Bitcoin make a lot of the money. So it's good that people knows that the difference between stablecoin and using the Bitcoin.
You've heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Bitcoin is freedom money. Pass it on. Let's get a round of applause for Roya and Faisal.
Thank you.
This way.